Before we begin, I want you to understand something very clearly. Every single thing you eat, every nutrient, every bite either drives your system toward greater strength and stability or pushes it further away from it. Today, we're going to talk about fruits. Yes, fruits, because not all fruits are created equal, especially when it comes to maintaining leg strength and mobility as you age. I'm going to walk you through 7 specific fruits that, based on their glycemic impact, fructose load, and interference with critical nutrient absorption, can silently erode your muscular foundation, particularly in the lower body. These aren't myths. These are mechanisms backed by biology. If you're 65 or older, or you care about someone who is, you need to know how these fruits interact with insulin, muscle protein synthesis, and mitochondrial health. Because your legs aren't just about movement, they're about independence, brain health, and longevity. So let's dive in, not into fear, but into science-based control. As we age, maintaining muscle strength, especially in the legs, becomes increasingly important for mobility, balance, and independence. Yet one of the most overlooked contributors to muscle weakness in older adults is diet, particularly the types of fruits consumed regularly. While fruits are widely seen as healthy due to their vitamin and antioxidant content, not all fruits are beneficial when it comes to preserving leg strength. In fact, certain fruits can accelerate muscle loss, disrupt glucose metabolism, and impair cellular energy production, especially in individuals over the age of 65. The connection between fruit intake and leg strength lies in the intricate relationship between nutrition, muscle physiology, and aging-related metabolic changes. At 65 and beyond, the body undergoes sarcopenia, a progressive loss of muscle mass and function, which is exacerbated by poor dietary choices that fail to support muscle protein synthesis and mitochondrial performance. Fruits that are high in fructose, low in fiber, and rich in simple sugars can spike blood glucose levels, leading to increased insulin production. While insulin is anabolic in certain contexts, repeated blood sugar spikes due to high fructose fruits can lead to insulin resistance, a condition that diminishes the body's ability to deliver nutrients efficiently to muscle cells. Muscle tissue, particularly in the legs, which carry the weight of the body, requires a steady supply of amino acids, glucose, and micronutrients to repair, grow, and function optimally. When insulin resistance is present, the signaling pathway that allows glucose and amino acids to enter muscle cells becomes impaired, resulting in poor nutrient delivery and increased muscle degradation over time. This can contribute directly to the gradual weakening of leg muscles, reduced walking speed, and greater risk of falls. Some fruits interfere with the body's ability to maintain electrolyte balance and hydration status, both of which are crucial for muscle contraction and neuromuscular coordination. For example, consuming large amounts of watermelon or pineapple may appear hydrating, but the sugar load can lead to rapid fluctuations in blood sugar and increase the need for minerals like magnesium and potassium, both essential for muscle function. Without adequate intake and retention of these minerals, muscle cramps, fatigue, and reduced endurance in the lower body can become more frequent, subtly undermining leg performance and mobility. At 65, the kidneys are also less efficient at regulating mineral levels, so sugar-dense fruits can have an even more destabilizing effect. Fruits like bananas and grapes, while popular, are high in simple sugars and can disrupt the hormonal environment necessary for muscle preservation. Elevated insulin from frequent high-sugar fruit consumption suppresses growth hormone and lowers testosterone, both of which are already declining naturally with age. These hormones play a central role in maintaining muscle integrity and supporting lean mass, especially in weight-bearing muscles like the quadriceps, hamstrings, and glutes. As hormonal signaling weakens under the pressure of poor dietary input, the muscles of the lower body lose their responsiveness to resistance, exercise, and protein intake. This creates a feedback loop in which muscle loss accelerates, strength diminishes, and daily tasks like climbing stairs or standing up from a chair become more difficult. Additionally, chronic low-grade inflammation caused by excess sugar from certain fruits activates catabolic pathways that break down muscle protein. Inflammatory markers such as C-reactive protein, CRP, and interleukin-6, IL-6, are elevated in older adults who consume diets high in sugar and low in anti-inflammatory nutrients. These markers are directly associated with reduced muscle mass and lower limb function. Some fruits, despite being natural, can contribute to this inflammatory burden when consumed in excess or without adequate dietary balance. Muscle fibers in the legs, which are constantly engaged in standing, walking, and balance, are especially vulnerable to inflammatory damage, and the regeneration process becomes slower and less effective with age. The liver's role in fructose metabolism is another key point. Fructose is metabolized primarily in the liver, where it is converted into triglycerides and stored as fat if not immediately used for energy. Unlike glucose, which can be utilized by all cells in the body, fructose places a unique metabolic burden on the liver. In older adults, a high fructose diet can lead to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is linked to systemic inflammation, hormonal disruption, and insulin resistance, all of which indirectly impair muscle strength and function. The energy systems within leg muscles become inefficient, leading to decreased stamina and reduced power output during physical activity. When these processes continue unchecked, the result is a significant loss of leg strength, contributing to frailty and increased dependency. Muscle regeneration also depends heavily on mitochondrial health, the ability of cells to produce energy efficiently. Some fruits, particularly those high in processed sugar or grown with heavy pesticide exposure, can contain compounds that interfere with mitochondrial function. Mitochondria are the powerhouses of the cells, especially active in muscle fibers, and they require steady input of clean nutrients, antioxidants, and coenzymes to function. An overload of fructose or sugar can impair mitochondrial biogenesis and reduce ATP output, which directly correlates with reduced strength and muscular endurance in the legs. Over time, this can lead to a state where muscles are unable to recover properly from even light activity, making day-to-day tasks more exhausting than they should be. Excessive fruit sugars spike insulin, blocking muscle protein synthesis and accelerating sarcopenia. At a surface level, it seems counterintuitive to think of fruit, something long considered a pillar of healthy eating, as a contributor to muscle loss. However, the metabolic reality becomes far more complex with age, especially around the age of 65 and beyond. The body's ability to regulate glucose, insulin, and nutrient signaling undergoes major shifts as part of the aging process. These changes have direct consequences for muscle maintenance, particularly in the legs, where strength is essential for stability, balance, and mobility. Sarcopenia, or age-related muscle loss, is one of the most pervasive conditions in older adults, and while exercise and protein intake play a major role in its progression or prevention, dietary sugar and fruit sugar in particular has a surprisingly potent impact on whether your body can keep or lose muscle. The primary sugar in many fruits is fructose, and while it's natural, that doesn't mean it's neutral. Fructose is metabolized differently from glucose. Instead of being used directly by cells for energy, it is sent to the liver, where it is converted into glycogen or fat depending on the body's energy demands. When fructose intake exceeds liver capacity, which is often the case with regular consumption of high fructose fruits like grapes, mangoes, or watermelon, the excess is converted into triglycerides and contributes to fat accumulation, insulin resistance, and metabolic disruption. This becomes even more concerning with age, when metabolic flexibility is already declining. Older individuals don't process fructose with the same efficiency as younger people, and over time, the repeated insulin spikes caused by high fructose fruit consumption begin to interfere with the muscle-building process. Insulin is often thought of as an anabolic hormone, and rightly so. It helps shuttle glucose and amino acids into cells, which is necessary for muscle repair and growth. However, in the presence of chronically elevated insulin levels, the body becomes less sensitive to insulin signals. This condition, known as insulin resistance, blunts the very processes insulin is supposed to support. In other words, when insulin is consistently elevated due to a high-sugar diet, the muscle cells stop responding efficiently to it. Amino acids are no longer delivered into the muscle fibers as effectively, and the result is a net loss of muscle protein over time. This is especially problematic for older adults who already have reduced anabolic sensitivity, a condition sometimes referred to as anabolic resistance, meaning they need a stronger stimulus from both nutrition and exercise to trigger muscle protein synthesis in the first place. When insulin levels are too high too often, they disrupt a number of hormonal cascades involved in muscle maintenance. One of these is the mTOR pathway, a critical cellular signaling mechanism that promotes protein synthesis and muscle growth. The activation of mTOR is dependent on both amino acid availability and hormonal balance. Elevated insulin, especially in the context of insulin resistance, interferes with proper mTOR activation, which means even if an older adult consumes adequate protein or performs resistance exercise, the signaling needed to actually build muscle is impaired. Leg muscles, being large and heavily used, are particularly dependent on efficient protein turnover and regeneration. When this process is blocked or slowed, sarcopenia accelerates, leading to a rapid decline in leg strength. Spikes in insulin caused by high-sugar fruits can displace the timing and absorption of more essential nutrients. For example, older adults often require higher intake of leucine, a branched-chain amino acid essential for muscle building to overcome anabolic resistance. But if fruit is consumed too frequently, especially between meals or alongside protein-rich meals, the insulin spike can overshadow the amino acid signaling, making it harder for the muscle to recognize the anabolic trigger. This essentially means the body has the raw materials to build muscle but lacks the proper hormonal and cellular environment to use them effectively. Another factor that contributes to this problem is the way aging muscles lose their responsiveness to nutrient cues. After the age of 60, muscle tissue becomes less metabolically active, and its receptors for insulin, amino acids, and growth factors become less sensitive. Therefore, any dietary pattern that promotes metabolic dysfunction, such as one with frequent or excessive intake of high-sugar fruits, compounds this natural decline. Instead of using nutrients to build and repair muscle, the body begins storing more energy as fat, particularly in visceral areas, and the muscles, especially in the lower body, atrophy from lack of stimulus and diminished nutrient signaling. Over time, leg muscles shrink, coordination suffers, and the risk of falls and fractures increases dramatically. Frequent insulin spikes disrupt circadian metabolic rhythms that are crucial for muscle recovery. The body has a natural ebb and flow in insulin sensitivity throughout the day, with highest sensitivity in the morning and early afternoon. Consuming sugary fruits late in the day or at night interferes with glucose metabolism and reduces the quality of overnight muscle repair. Nighttime is when growth hormone is secreted at its peak, and when blood sugar is elevated during this window, growth hormone release is suppressed, blunting one of the key nighttime processes for muscle maintenance and recovery. This creates a compounding effect in older adults: poor sleep, poor hormonal function, poor muscle repair. Sarcopenia isn't just about losing muscle, it's about losing access to independence and quality of life. The insulin spikes caused by certain fruit choices play a hidden but critical role in this decline. They interrupt the hormonal and nutrient flow needed for leg muscle maintenance and regeneration, pushing the body further toward frailty even when it appears that the person is eating healthy. Recognizing the metabolic cost of high fructose fruits, particularly when consumed frequently, is key for reversing or slowing muscle loss in aging populations. Certain tropical fruits cause chronic inflammation, directly affecting neuromuscular signaling and joint stability. Inflammation is a foundational mechanism in the body meant to defend and repair tissues in response to injury or infection. But when inflammation becomes chronic, even at low levels, it begins to damage tissues rather than protect them. For older adults, particularly those over 65, low-grade chronic inflammation is a common but often hidden condition, contributing to muscle loss, joint pain, impaired mobility, and even neurodegenerative disorders. This state is often referred to in research as inflammaging, and diet plays a critical role in either fueling or controlling it. Among dietary triggers, certain tropical fruits, while rich in vitamins and appealing in taste, can worsen this low-grade inflammatory response, directly undermining neuromuscular function and the strength and stability systems of the lower body. Many tropical fruits such as mangoes, pineapples, lychees, papayas, and bananas are high in fructose and simple carbohydrates. While natural sugars are different from refined ones in terms of source, the physiological impact, particularly in large quantities, can be surprisingly similar in older adults with already reduced metabolic flexibility. These fruits rapidly elevate blood glucose levels, and repeated glucose spikes are a known driver of systemic inflammation. When glucose levels rise quickly, the body responds by producing insulin, and while this hormone is needed to regulate blood sugar, the overproduction of insulin, especially when fruit sugars are consumed frequently, leads to metabolic stress and the overactivation of inflammatory cytokines like IL-6, TNF-alpha, and CRP. These inflammatory mediators circulate through the bloodstream and target multiple tissues, including muscles, joints, and neurons. Inflammation within the neuromuscular system directly interferes with the transmission of electrical signals between nerves and muscles. Motor neurons, which carry signals from the spinal cord to the muscle fibers, rely on a precise chemical environment to function. When inflammatory cytokines are elevated, they can disrupt synaptic transmission, reduce motor unit recruitment, and impair the function of acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter responsible for muscle activation. In simple terms, the signal from the brain to the leg muscles becomes less clear, less forceful, and slower, making movement less coordinated and more fatiguing. Over time, this leads to a reduction in muscle engagement, underuse of muscle fibers, and gradual weakening of the legs, particularly the quadriceps and calves, which are crucial for standing, walking, and balance. Tropical fruits are also known to contain certain bioactive compounds, such as histamine salicylates and lectins, which may trigger inflammatory responses in sensitive individuals. While these compounds are naturally occurring and often harmless in younger or metabolically resilient people, older adults with gut permeability issues or immune dysregulation may experience heightened responses. For example, pineapples contain bromelain, which has both pro- and anti-inflammatory effects depending on the individual's internal environment. In people with impaired gut integrity or existing inflammatory conditions like arthritis or metabolic syndrome, these compounds can act as irritants rather than healers. They may promote gut inflammation, which then leaks inflammatory molecules into systemic circulation, a condition known as endotoxemia. When the gut barrier is compromised, large undigested food particles or toxins can pass into the bloodstream, provoking immune activation. This immune activation leads to systemic inflammation that targets joint linings, synovial tissue, and muscle sheaths. In the lower body, this is particularly harmful because joint inflammation reduces stability and range of motion, while muscle sheath inflammation makes the muscle more prone to fatigue and soreness. Over time, this makes walking, standing, and maintaining posture more difficult, even if muscle mass appears unchanged. The neuromuscular system needs not only healthy muscle, but also clean, inflammation-free communication between the nervous system and the musculoskeletal framework. Joint stability is also compromised when chronic inflammation degrades collagen and connective tissue integrity. Certain fruits with a high fructose load may indirectly contribute to this by generating advanced glycation end products, AGEs, which form when sugars react with proteins in the body. AGEs are known to damage collagen, the primary protein in ligaments, tendons, and joint cartilage. Once collagen is damaged, joints lose their ability to absorb impact and maintain alignment under stress. For someone over 65, even a small loss in joint stability can translate into reduced stride length, slower walking speed, and increased risk of falls. This becomes especially relevant in weight-bearing joints like knees and hips, where inflammation causes stiffness, reduced synovial fluid production, and increased friction during movement. The persistent consumption of high-fructose tropical fruits contributes to an overproduction of reactive oxygen species, ROS, which cause oxidative stress at the cellular level. ROS accumulation impairs the mitochondria, particularly in active tissues like leg muscles, leading to poor energy output and slower recovery. Mitochondrial dysfunction has been strongly associated with both muscle atrophy and neuromuscular decline in the aging population. Oxidative stress also heightens the sensitivity of pain receptors in the joints and muscles, making older individuals more likely to feel soreness, stiffness, and fatigue from routine activities. When this discomfort increases, movement decreases, resulting in further loss of strength, flexibility, and coordination in the legs. On a hormonal level, chronic inflammation interferes with the production and signaling of anabolic hormones like testosterone and growth hormone, both of which are already declining with age. Inflammation shifts the body into a more catabolic state where muscle breakdown outpaces muscle repair. The result is not only a reduction in muscle mass, but a decline in neuromuscular efficiency, meaning the brain has to work harder to activate the same muscles, often with poorer results. This phenomenon is often seen in older adults who experience tremors, slow gait, or postural instability, all of which can be traced back in part to inflammatory interference with neuromuscular circuits. Even the psychological effects of inflammation, such as fatigue, low motivation, and reduced cognitive clarity, feed into the cycle of inactivity and muscle degeneration. When the brain perceives the body as inflamed or under threat, it tends to conserve energy, reduce physical drive, and lower neuromuscular activation thresholds. This biologically protective mechanism becomes counterproductive in aging, when movement is essential for maintaining function. The more frequently tropical fruits contribute to this inflammatory burden, the more the neuromuscular system suffers, particularly in the legs, which depend on a delicate balance of electrical, chemical, and mechanical signals to function optimally. Some fruits chelate essential minerals like magnesium and potassium, depleting leg strength and recovery capacity. Minerals play a vital role in nearly every biological function related to muscle contraction, nerve conduction, cellular hydration, and recovery, and they become even more critical with age. As people cross the threshold of 65, mineral balance becomes more fragile due to reduced absorption efficiency in the gut, declining kidney function, increased medication use, and chronic low-level inflammation. In this context, certain fruits, particularly those high in oxalates, phytates, and tannins, can unintentionally bind to and remove key minerals from the body, a process known as chelation. While chelation is sometimes therapeutic in cases of heavy metal poisoning, it becomes detrimental when it leads to the loss of beneficial minerals that are essential for neuromuscular performance and overall leg strength. Magnesium is a core element for muscle relaxation, energy production, as a cofactor for ATP and nervous system regulation. It also helps stabilize blood glucose levels, supports protein synthesis, and maintains electrical gradients across cell membranes. Potassium, on the other hand, is essential for muscle contraction, nerve impulse transmission, and maintaining proper cellular hydration and electrolyte balance. Both minerals are tightly regulated by the kidneys and intestines, and their availability directly impacts muscular performance, especially in large muscle groups like those in the legs. The quadriceps, hamstrings, glutes, and calves rely heavily on magnesium and potassium to contract efficiently, recover after strain, and stay protected from cramping or fatigue. When certain fruits, particularly berries like cranberries, blackberries, and pomegranates, or fruits like starfruit and rhubarb, are consumed frequently or in large amounts, they introduce compounds such as oxalates that can bind to magnesium and calcium in the gut, preventing their absorption. Once bound, these minerals form insoluble complexes that are excreted from the body rather than used for cellular function. Over time, this creates a state of mineral depletion, especially in older adults whose absorption rates are already diminished. A person over 65 may already be consuming suboptimal levels of magnesium or potassium, and the added effect of dietary chelation can tip them into a deficient state, sometimes without obvious symptoms at first, until muscle weakness or persistent fatigue sets in. Leg strength depends on optimal electrical signaling between the brain, spinal cord, and muscle tissue. This signaling is carried out via action potentials, which require an exact balance of sodium, potassium, calcium, and magnesium across the membranes of neurons and muscle cells. Even a slight drop in intracellular magnesium can cause hyperexcitability, twitching, or poor muscular control, while low potassium levels, hypokalemia, can lead to muscle cramps, slow reflexes, and a feeling of heaviness or instability in the legs. This is particularly dangerous for aging individuals who rely on steady leg control to prevent falls and maintain independence. If these minerals are being lost through dietary chelation, their muscles lose the electrical coordination needed to perform daily tasks like rising from a chair, walking uphill, or catching balance on uneven surfaces. Recovery after physical exertion also depends on these minerals. Magnesium is necessary to deactivate the contraction signal in muscles, allowing them to relax and regenerate. Without sufficient magnesium, muscles remain partially contracted, leading to soreness, stiffness, and delayed recovery. Older adults may notice that after a walk, climb, or leg exercise, their legs feel unusually sore for days, not because the activity was too intense, but because the minerals needed to support proper recovery were not available in adequate amounts. Similarly, potassium helps shuttle nutrients and waste products in and out of cells, maintaining hydration and supporting mitochondrial function. When potassium is low, leg muscles cannot clear out metabolic byproducts efficiently, leading to faster onset of fatigue and decreased endurance. It's not only oxalates that play a role. Other naturally occurring compounds in fruits, such as tannins and phytates, can also bind with minerals and impair absorption. Tannins, found in grapes and unripe bananas, have been shown to interfere with iron and zinc uptake and may also indirectly affect magnesium retention. Phytates, often associated with seeds and skins of certain fruits, act as anti-nutrients, reducing the bioavailability of several key minerals in the digestive tract. The more often these fruits are consumed without proper mineral counterbalance, the more pronounced the depletion effect becomes. In younger individuals, the body may compensate, but for someone over 65, even minor nutrient imbalances can have outsized effects on performance and resilience. Kidney function is another factor that complicates the relationship between fruit consumption and mineral balance in aging adults. The kidneys are responsible for filtering excess minerals, but also for retaining and recycling them when needed. With age, renal efficiency declines, meaning that the kidneys may fail to conserve magnesium and potassium effectively. When fruits that promote mineral loss are introduced into the diet, the body may be unable to reabsorb what's needed, leading to a chronic low mineral state that is not always obvious through routine blood tests, as most magnesium is stored intracellularly and not reflected well in serum measurements. The result is an insidious erosion of the body's mineral reserves, directly impairing leg strength, muscular responsiveness, and recovery rate. Even hydration is affected. Fruits high in fructose increase urinary calcium and magnesium excretion and promote diuresis, which can further deplete electrolytes. Many older individuals are already mildly dehydrated due to reduced thirst perception, and fruits that act as mild diuretics exacerbate this state. Dehydrated muscles are more prone to injury, fatigue faster, and lose the elastic properties that support smooth, powerful movement. This is especially problematic for the legs, which bear the load of body weight and require constant hydration and mineral exchange to function optimally. Without it, performance declines rapidly, and the individual may not even realize their fruit choices are at the root of their mobility challenges. Hidden pesticide residues in conventionally grown fruits disrupt hormonal pathways that regulate muscle repair and leg mass retention. While fruits are often celebrated for their vitamins, antioxidants, and fiber, what remains less discussed is the silent biochemical burden they can carry due to agricultural practices. As people age, especially past 65, the body becomes increasingly sensitive to endocrine disruptors, which are substances that interfere with the hormonal system. These disruptors can originate from pesticides commonly used on non-organic fruits, and when consumed regularly, even in small doses, they interfere with the delicate hormonal balance necessary for maintaining lean muscle mass, especially in large, functional muscle groups such as those in the legs. The endocrine system plays a pivotal role in regulating muscle regeneration, repair, and preservation. Hormones like testosterone, estrogen, insulin like growth factor 1, ICF1, and growth hormone all influence muscle protein synthesis, satellite cell activation, and muscle fiber differentiation. In younger individuals, these hormones operate efficiently, and muscle repair from daily stress or resistance training is swift and reliable. However, in older adults, natural hormone levels decline, and the body becomes more reliant on environmental cues and internal consistency to maintain muscle health. When endocrine disrupting chemicals, EDCs, are introduced through food, especially pesticide-laden fruits, they can mimic or block hormonal signals, throwing off this already fragile hormonal ecosystem. Organophosphates, neonicotinoids, and carbamates are among the most common classes of pesticides used in large-scale fruit agriculture. These chemicals have been shown to interfere with androgen and estrogen receptor sites, distort thyroid hormone activity, and impair mitochondrial energy production, all of which are essential to healthy muscle function. In fruits such as apples, strawberries, peaches, cherries, and nectarines, testing often reveals multiple pesticide residues per sample, some of which persist even after washing. These residues are lipid-soluble, meaning they can accumulate in fatty tissues and cell membranes, leading to long-term exposure and disruption. One significant concern is the way EDCs interfere with testosterone and ICF1, two anabolic hormones closely tied to leg muscle strength and hypertrophy. Testosterone is not only important for men, women also rely on it in smaller amounts for muscle tone and maintenance. Pesticide exposure can lower natural testosterone production, reduce receptor sensitivity, and inhibit the conversion of testosterone into its more active form, dihydrotestosterone. The downstream effect is reduced muscle protein synthesis and a lower capacity to regenerate after microtrauma, which is the small, healthy damage done to muscle fibers during movement or exercise that typically signals for repair and growth. ICF1 is another critical player in the maintenance of leg strength, especially in older adults. This hormone activates satellite cells, precursor muscle cells, that fuse with existing muscle fibers to repair damage and add volume. Certain pesticides have been shown to impair IGF-1 signaling pathways, reducing the capacity of satellite cells to respond to muscle damage. Without these cells, even moderate daily activities like walking upstairs, lifting groceries, or getting up from a chair begin to challenge the muscle, leading to faster atrophy and loss of mobility in the legs. Over time, this diminishes stride strength, balance, and reflexes, even in individuals who believe they're eating healthy. Another pathway affected by pesticide residues is thyroid hormone regulation. Thyroid hormones control the metabolic rate of cells and are essential for mitochondrial activity and overall energy production in muscle tissue. Several pesticide compounds are known to block iodine uptake, interfere with thyroid hormone receptor expression, or inhibit the conversion of T4 to the more active T3. A reduction in T3 levels slows metabolism at the cellular level, reducing ATP generation and impairing the muscle's ability to contract with strength and endurance. In leg muscles, this shows up as fatigue, heaviness, or weakness, particularly during sustained walking or weight-bearing tasks. Pesticides also impair insulin sensitivity, which compounds the challenge of maintaining muscle with age. Insulin is needed to deliver glucose and amino acids into muscle cells, and when the cells become insulin resistant due to chronic exposure to toxins, nutrient uptake is impaired. This results in poor muscle glycogen storage, limited energy reserves, and reduced amino acid availability for repair. For the legs muscles that are heavily used every day, this nutrient bottleneck means slow recovery, more soreness, and progressively diminishing strength, even with adequate protein intake. In addition, the mitochondrial function of muscle cells is directly influenced by pesticide exposure. Mitochondria generate energy in the form of ATP, which powers muscle contractions. Some pesticides act as mitochondrial toxins, disrupting the electron transport chain and increasing the production of reactive oxygen species, or OS. As oxidative stress rises, muscle cells experience more damage and less efficient energy output. Aging already compromises mitochondrial density and function, and the addition of these toxic stressors accelerates the decline. In leg muscles, this translates to reduced power output, compromised balance, and slower response times, all of which increase the risk of falls and mobility limitations. Even the gut microbiome is affected by pesticides, and this has indirect but powerful implications for leg muscle strength. A healthy gut supports proper nutrient absorption, inflammation control, and immune signaling, all of which are essential for maintaining an anabolic state. Many pesticides are antimicrobial in nature and reduce populations of beneficial gut bacteria. This shift in gut flora leads to impaired digestion, increased intestinal permeability, and systemic inflammation, all of which reduce the body's ability to build or repair muscle. When the gut is compromised, nutrients that support leg strength, such as B vitamins, amino acids, and magnesium, are less efficiently absorbed, and inflammation further disrupts neuromuscular signaling. As muscle quality diminishes under the influence of these endocrine disruptors, posture and gait begin to change. Small shifts in muscle tone or contraction timing can cause the hips to sway, knees to hyperextend, or ankles to collapse inward. These are subtle yet significant signs that hormonal pathways are no longer optimally supporting muscle function. For people over 65, even slight losses in lower body coordination can lead to a chain reaction of compensations, muscle imbalances, and eventual injury, creating a downward spiral in strength, stability, and independence. Overripe fruits spike blood sugar unpredictably, weakening capillary networks that feed leg muscles. As fruit ripens beyond its peak, enzymatic processes break down complex carbohydrates into simpler sugars such as glucose, fructose, and sucrose. While these sugars may enhance sweetness and taste, their impact on blood glucose regulation can be harmful, especially in older adults whose metabolic control is already impaired due to age-related insulin resistance, declining beta cell function, and reduced physical activity. The glycemic response to overripe fruit is faster and more volatile, triggering sharper insulin surges and blood sugar fluctuations that strain vascular health, particularly in the microvascular networks that supply oxygen and nutrients to working muscles in the lower extremities. Blood sugar regulation is central to muscular health. Every muscle fiber depends on a consistent and controlled delivery of glucose and oxygen through capillaries to sustain contraction, recover from fatigue, and repair arthroscopic damage. In individuals over 65, where vascular flexibility is reduced and capillary density has already begun to due to aging, the system becomes increasingly sensitive to metabolic disturbances. Overripe fruits like bananas, pears, mangoes, and grapes can rapidly elevate blood glucose levels, creating spikes that damage endothelial cells, the thin lining of blood vessels, responsible for regulating capillary dilation, contraction, and nutrient transfer. Repeated damage to this endothelial lining compromises vascular tone, reduces nitric oxide production, and leads to stiffened, narrowed vessels that cannot properly perfuse the large muscles in the legs. When glucose spikes become a regular occurrence, advanced glycation end products, AGEs, begin to form. These are compounds created when excess sugars bind to proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids in the body. AGEs are particularly damaging to the small, fragile capillaries that run through muscle tissue, nerve endings, and joint surfaces. They make the vessels brittle, less elastic, and prone to microtears. In the legs, where capillary networks are dense and essential for sustaining high-demand muscle groups like the quadriceps, glutes, and calves, this loss of microvascular function limits both oxygen delivery and waste removal. As a result, muscles receive less fuel, fatigue more quickly, and take longer to recover after even low-intensity activity such as walking, standing, or light resistance work. Unpredictable blood sugar fluctuations from overripe fruit create oxidative stress through excessive production of free radicals. These reactive molecules impair mitochondrial function inside muscle cells, reducing ATP output and slowing muscle contractions. Older adults already experience a natural decline in mitochondrial density and efficiency, and when oxidative stress adds to the burden, muscles become even less capable of sustaining strength, endurance, or balance. In the legs, where large muscle groups must work in coordinated efforts for mobility and stability, this oxidative stress reduces neuromuscular reliability, leading to feelings of heaviness, tremor, or reduced responsiveness. The pancreas also bears the brunt of repeated glucose spikes. As it works to manage the sudden influx of sugar from overripe fruit, it secretes large amounts of insulin. Over time, these insulin bursts lead to receptor desensitization, a condition where cells become less responsive to insulin signal to absorb glucose. This condition, insulin resistance, is common in the elderly and directly impairs glucose uptake into muscle tissue. Without adequate glucose entering the cells, leg muscles starve for energy even when the bloodstream is flooded with it. This paradoxical energy shortage causes muscle atrophy, poor repair, and diminished performance, even when the diet appears to be rich in natural carbohydrates. Overripe fruits also cause a transient osmotic shift in the blood. High concentrations of simple sugars in the bloodstream pull water out of muscle cells to maintain equilibrium, leading to intracellular dehydration. Dehydrated muscle fibers lose elasticity, coordination, and the ability to contract with full force. In the legs, this intracellular water loss translates to tightness, instability, and reduced gait control, especially under exertion or during balance-dependent tasks such as walking downstairs or turning suddenly. Muscles also become more vulnerable to cramping and strain when hydration is disrupted, compounding the risk of injury or mobility limitations. The impact extends to nerve function as well. Nerves that control muscle contraction in the legs, especially the long peripheral nerves that extend down to the feet, require constant nourishment from small capillaries. These tiny vessels are the most vulnerable to glucose-induced damage. Over time, capillary stiffening and endothelial dysfunction limit the oxygen supply to nerves, leading to a condition known as diabetic or metabolic neuropathy. Even in non-diabetic individuals, repeated exposure to blood sugar spikes from overripe fruits can cause subtle sensory loss, slowed reflexes, or tingling in the lower legs. These symptoms impair proprioception, the sense of body position and movement, which is crucial for balance, posture, and coordinated stepping. Compounding the problem is the behavioral response to sugar spikes followed by inevitable crashes. When blood sugar plummets after a sharp spike, older individuals may feel weak, lethargic, or dizzy. This discourages movement and leads to increased sedentary behavior, which is one of the strongest predictors of declining leg strength. Muscles that are not consistently challenged begin to atrophy, especially in aging adults where muscle protein synthesis is already slowed due to hormonal changes. The loss of even a few grams of lean muscle from the legs over time translates into meaningful reductions in strength, stride length, and mobility confidence. Overripe fruits may also disrupt leptin and ghrelin signaling hormones that regulate hunger and satiety. Sugar spikes can temporarily increase cravings and override normal appetite controls, encouraging overeating or snacking behaviors that further disturb metabolic balance. For older adults, managing total caloric intake is important to avoid unwanted fat gain, especially visceral fat that interferes with hormonal health and insulin sensitivity. When overripe fruits are a regular part of the diet, they contribute not only to sugar overload, but also to appetite dysregulation, which indirectly undermines body composition, muscle-to-fat ratio, and functional leg strength.